It's pretty crazy to think that the semester is almost over. I hope you all have taken away something meaningful to you personally from all the different speakers we've had, and what a diverse batch it has been. Today, we're lucky to have two phenomenally talented and accomplished guests who will be joined on stage by student moderator Russ Ude, who's a former Cal football player and current Haas student and entrepreneur here. From all of the different speakers we've heard, there's been a lot of different ideas and themes that have been raised across a number of different industries. But one common one that has come up frequently has been the topic of raising capital and getting your business off the ground. Today, both of our speakers will be able to chat about being on both sides of that table, and our first guest is Nicole Patrice De Member. Nicole is currently starting up a new company, and originally she grew up in the Bay Area and then briefly attended the University of Arizona before making her way over here. Though her initial ventures were centered around the music industry, her latest venture aims to elevate the way in which data is shared and utilized. Our second guest, Ryan Panchadsaram, is a Cal and Entrepreneurship Center alum, graduating in 2005. Yeah. Oh, 07? Tony was 05. Yeah, all right, sorry. So Tony and Ryan were classmates, and so this means that you get to hear a lot of stories from both of them about the shenanigans they got up to when they were at school, but that's a conversation for after class, not during class. Ryan was Deputy CTO of the United States under the first CTO, Todd Park, and he played a critical role in changing how Washington views and approaches technology solutions. For those of you who remember Ginny Kim's talk from earlier in the semester, Ryan was also part of that select team that helped fix the healthcare.gov crisis, and he actually shared that Time magazine cover with her in March 2014. Currently, Ryan is an investor at KPCB. Both of today's investors made their marks in very different industries, but they share in common a fearless pursuit of some of our generation's biggest challenges. To quote one of today's guests, "The pursuit of the unknown is not an undertaking for the timid." And while many words accurately describe today's guests, accomplished, passionate, and innovative are just a few that come to mind, I think it's safe to say that timid certainly isn't one of them. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Nicole Patrice De Member and Ryan Panchadsaram.
All right, guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to visit with us. This is a beautiful thing, to have all these people, these bright Berkeley minds in here to learn from people like yourselves who are just doing big things that we all hope to and aspire to measure up to. So in case all of you are wondering why I am sitting here with these two savages, I personally have a great relationship with Nicole, and I'm lucky enough to call her a mentor, and was lucky enough to form a relationship with Ryan more recently. And me and Nicole originally connected thanks to Victoria and this class last semester. The Noon Series is a great opportunity to learn about entrepreneurship from established entrepreneurs, people who have done the corporate route, people who have dropped out and then made it big. It's just a great opportunity all around, and I really was just sitting in one of those seats and was very inspired by everything that I was able to learn from this course. So after I would get done with these courses, listening to people talk, I would come down and visit with anyone whom I felt a personal connection to or wanted to learn a little bit more about or wanted to connect to or with outside of this particular course. And by sharing my interests in the music industry and other creative industries with Victoria continuously after this class, she kind of took it upon herself, and I'm super grateful to you for that, so thanks. To connect me with Nicole, who I'm very grateful to call a friend, a mentor, and now to be able to meet people like yourself, Ryan, who now I'm glad to call a friend. So with that, let's get into it.
Follow up, you guys. Pays to follow up.
What she said.
Oh, here we go. Hello. So I'll start by saying when Victoria introduced Russ and I got a little of his background, an old friend was in San Francisco for a hip hop show named J Electronica, and so I asked her if he could come over into the city and go to the show. We were hosting a dinner prior with a lot of our friends through the music industry, and she was able to write it off, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, this is a very Berkeley thing to do. So it was nice to have him out there and sit at a table of very accomplished musicians and spend some time just seeing like more the nature of the business side, everyone being pretty heads down preparing for work, which I think a lot of times looks like fun. And that being said, I had started by mistake. I was asked to leave the University of Arizona twice. They felt I was a difficult student. I didn't fit their program. My neighbors were throwing raves and they were getting busted. And this is in 1996 and 97. So I was going to school for political science and help them understand permits they could get to where their party wouldn't get shut down. So we were kind of bending rules a little and finding loopholes. Calling it like a family reunion. There's all sorts of different things that, as long as you had the paperwork, the cops couldn't really do anything. And then we got really savvy and we hired off-duty cops to protect us from the other cops that were working. And then we ended up with a lot of cash on hand, which became also dangerous. And we started looking at online transactions. And by 98, we had hit a weekend of doing 5,000 credit card transactions. And my old boss, Peter Thiel, was the one that actually pointed out to me in that time period of 1998, that was a very high number of credit card transactions, and he was very taken back by how we had got that many people to put their credit card on the internet to a website that they didn't understand. And I was like, well, our clientele is like going to dance. Like it's not a lady trying to buy shoes at Nordstrom's. And so it was just kind of we kept falling into more scenarios like that along the way. But that led us into building out a social network online that was really just a message board. It's still up online called raves.com. And once again, back to the police, still not happy with these raves. Didn't know how to use the internet as well then, and so it was just not as common. And so people could post where these dance parties were around the country, and no one was getting busted as long as they weren't like really having flyers out. And then that led into having a recording studio in Michigan, which ended up becoming a hotbed for hip-hop artists. And after a while, we had sold the studio to Dr. Dre, 50 Cent, and Eminem. So, and they still have it, which is great, and it's now the official studio of Def Jam Records. So it's still used, which is a cool thing to have, to build something that big and not have it just get shelved. We had a label with it, and then the artist I had mentioned, Jay Electronica, we had signed, and he's a very coveted co-author of a lot of probably your favorite hip hop, and we ended up signing that over to Rock Nation. And so he's done a lot of work with a lot of artists on that label. But yeah, so that was kind of like my entree into doing stuff, which kind of stemmed from, I had a belief that if I didn't have a degree, no one would hire me. It's like listening to society. So I was like, oh, I have to make my own job. And I think had I really felt more comfortable now realizing that enough people hire without degrees, I don't think I would have worked that hard, I don't know. But that's kind of like, it's a little bit of the story of it.
So Ryan, now that Nicole's given her background, why don't you share with us a little bit about yours?
Of course, we've got a lot to cover with the time that we have. So in the role I am in now as a funder, that's not where I always started. I actually was a founder at the beginning, and I've actually tried to be a founder at almost every little chapter of at least my career, right? Back at Cal, I was a 07 industrial engineer, but my passion really was in film production and producing. And so myself with 3 others, Ani, Cindy, and Chow, we ended up starting Cal TV. And for us, it was this outlet from our main degree, which in my case was in the engineering department. It was a way to be a lot more expressive. It was a way to take, actually, oddly, a lot of the things I was learning in IUR and apply them into something else. But for me, that was kind of the first little unlocking of this skill, that no matter where you are, you actually can build something, no matter how little money or anything that you have. I think we had maybe about $800 that the ASUC gave us, and then the next year we asked for a little bit more, and I think they gave us maybe $2,000, and by the time I left, I think they were giving us a couple of $1,000s a year, and then now you have actually a really vibrant, is anyone here in Cal TV at all? Any chance? Okay. If you watch Cal TV? Does anyone watch Cal TV? Yeah. A few. Okay, if not, go to caltv.berkeley.edu and you can see it there. But I graduated Cal and went out into work at least I thought the biggest company that I knew of. And for me, that was at Microsoft. I think there was a Cal in its earlier iteration, and this is only just 10 years ago, which really encouraged folks to go to big places to learn from them. And I went to Microsoft, and Microsoft was based up in Seattle, but I worked down here out in Mountain View and was working on the Outlook for Mac team. And there, that was a brand new product being created for the Mac. And for me, it was this experience where you can be this small little organization in this larger little vehicle. But at a certain point, you've learned a lot from your mentors. I had an amazing manager named Christy Duncan who gave me essentially the ropes and what it was like to be a product manager. But she always said, if you have a great idea, you should try to build it, right? And for her, she was like, well, while you work in my team, try to build it on the side. And so the first company I started was one called Pipette, and it was to monitor patients post-discharge of hospitals. But it didn't start out there. It actually started out as simply just a data collection tool. This is right around 2010, you have the iPad that's come out, the iPhone is getting really popular, and for us, we saw people trying to use it in more places. And my background being more on the enterprise, I was like, well, wouldn't it be great if you could create a form and fill it out on all these devices? And so we built something together in the course of 3 months, put it out there. You had some really good uses in the marketing side, but we ended up having maybe close to 100 customers, and 2 of them ended up being doctors. And we had to reach out to them because we had to tell them not to use our service. And if you've heard of something called HIPAA and a lot of security things with personal health information, it was a really important thing to make sure these folks weren't doing that on our platform or we could get in trouble. And so when we reached out to talk to them about what they were doing with our product, we fell in love with their mission and what they were doing with our tool. And that was, for one psychiatrist and one oncologist, was to see what was happening beyond their walls. And so we shifted our company and went after that, because for us, we knew that we could build the tech, but this was something that really pulled at our heartstrings. And so that company ended up getting acquired by this Boston-based Media Lab spin-out. I went there. I ended up finding myself in DC a couple of years later as what they call a Presidential Innovation Fellow, which is this way to put entrepreneurial people in government to start new things. I've found myself getting really drawn to that. When the door opens of this kind of new opportunity where you don't know too much of what's about to happen, I tend to try to jump into those and see what it was like. And so President Obama had this program called the Presidential Innovation Fellows, worked on it, thought it would be something that would last 6 months, and it ended up being something that lasted 3.5 years. You guys spent time with Jeannie Kim, who's an incredible entrepreneur, but she already told you the healthcare.gov story. And that was perhaps one of the most exhausting periods of my life, right? We were sleeping maybe 2-3 hours a night for a 6-month stretch trying to rescue this website, right? But this website was just a small piece in this bigger thing called the Affordable Care Act and helping folks get health care. And when that ended, I was ready to come back home because I was doing actually long distance between San Francisco and DC, and the president, Todd Park, and myself figured, you can't let a good crisis go to waste. And so we, from that moment, felt that you needed to make sure things like this didn't happen again. And so we started something called the United States Digital Service, which over the course of 3 years has recruited over 500 people from the private sector into government. But it was just this opportunity, right? Before healthcare.gov, techies and engineers and really folks like us were really put to the fringes. But it was the first time ever, a cabinet level, a presidential priority was crippled by tech. And so post that experience, it was like a way for us to be at the table. And with the administration change, a lot of techies left DC, but there's still quite a few there working in the agencies like the VA and Department of Ed. And so did that for 4 years, ended up moving back, and then tried to figure out what I wanted to do next. And so I'll put a pause there, because that's the switch to the funder side.
Yeah, definitely. So even though you guys had very different starting points, you guys both took this journey from being founders to funders. And knowing the both of you, I feel like you've always chased both altruism and opportunity and looked for ways to find positive impacts in whatever opportunities you delve into. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your guiding principles and how that has helped you seize opportunities and know which ones to turn down and which ones to take?
Okay, so after I had, I had no more companies, had sold everything off, took some time, did a lot of travel, was really looking to see what was next for me. kind of just lurked around and hung out at the MySpace office. It had just been bought by Rupert Murdoch. Was just talking with a lot of friends. Twitter was just getting going, and just kind of seeing what they were doing, why they were doing it, what was interesting at that time. And after a little while, I ended up moving to New York. I'd never lived in New York. I figured I'd take this time. And a friend had just started renting a house that's kind of a famous house. It's called the Bacchus House. His name is Sean Parker. And he and I and Ken Howery were hosting cocktails there and just trying to meet interesting people in New York and see what was going on and kind of just get a read of it. I got caught back in. I was still kind of stuck in this, like, I need a degree. And so friends had told me to apply at the New School. Apparently it's a school in New York anybody can get into, except me. So they told me no, and I was pretty pissed. And then that night, the guys were like, why don't you talk to our friend Peter Thiel? Like, you should go work for him. And I didn't know who Peter was, and I got on the phone with him a couple days later, and really within like a week, I took a job. I didn't know what VC was. I was just not familiar with this world. I'd come from a very different way of doing business in a different group of people that I was working with. But I ended up out in San Francisco, and they really opened up like huge amounts of doors to me, allowed me into just see a lot of like end of the year reviews and see like I worked pretty closely on the Facebook IPO, which was a very big learning opportunity. Like these were just terms I hadn't even known prior. But it was a lot of fun just to like kind of pop into offices, and I'd be like, oh, can I come visit? And people would be like, sure, who are you? And I'm like, I work for Peter Thiel. And they'd be like, okay. No idea who I was. I had no idea what they were. I just knew like I was supposed to be doing something. So I'd just meander around Silicon Valley and like show up to events, and people would be like, why are you here? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I don't know, actually. I'm just here to check stuff out. And they're like, well, like, where do you work? And I'd be like, Founders Fund. Oh, okay, you can be here. You're fine. So it was kind of an interesting, like, I think there was a lot, had I not had those guys behind me, they would have been like, leave. But I had, through that accumulated just Bruce Gibney, who was actually the founding CEO of Founders Fund. And he was one of the early investors in PayPal. He was Ken Howery's roommate. He was phenomenal with me, and I didn't know this until last year in November. I had asked him, a group of us had all got together, and I was like, did people complain about me a lot? Like, was there any like confusion or what I was doing? And he just laughed so hard, and he's like, oh no, people like would demand you should be fired. Like they were so confused, like what you were doing, you were so off script from what they were used to. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I wasn't technically trained in a lot of stuff, but I'd also had these benchmarks of success. And I was like, why didn't you or Peter ever tell me? And he's like, there was no point. You weren't doing anything wrong. They were just very confused by you. And so all those years, they never like let on, and they just let me do my job. And I was like I've actually looked at it a lot now with my current team, and like how I talk with them and what they actually need to know and what they don't, what's not gonna serve them. I think people's constructs and their opinions at times of like who you are and why you're there is, it's their own problem. It's not yours.
How many folks here want to start a company or organization in the next 10 years? That's fantastic. I think one of the incredible things about the CET program is that like instilling of even more entrepreneurship at Cal. When I said I left Berkeley going to the biggest company, I think that's, it was maybe partially Berkeley, or at least partially the way that I was thinking at the time. I think, Russ asked guiding principles, go to the place where you think you can learn the most. And for me, that's where my heart really was at. And so for many of you, when you think about your internships or what you do after Cal, like go to where you're going to learn the most. And that may be at the largest company, it may be at the largest nonprofit, it may be at another school or institution, or it might actually be starting something, right? And that could be a company or a nonprofit. Sometimes when you throw yourself out there and start to build something from scratch, you learn lessons like really the hard way. For me, my experience in healthcare, I would never have been brought into that world if it weren't for those two physicians. But once you enter it, you uncover a lot of things by trial and error in ways that you would never learn in a classroom. And so like guiding principle and whatever you think about doing next, it's like go where you can learn the most. And at a certain point when you start feeling like you're not able to learn enough, like move on to the next thing, find that other person within that organization. Like you really need to move yourself around, because if not, you're doing yourself a disservice. Like if you look back at the clock and 2-3 years have gone by and you're like, I haven't grown, it's absolutely time to take that next step. For me, my switch back and kind of transition into being a funder really was by almost mistake or accident or just kind of circumstance. So John Doerr is the chairman of Kleiner Perkins. He's a pretty legendary investor. He was one of the first investors in Google and Amazon and in Twitter. And he was looking for someone to work with, and very much kind of in the Peter-esque way, you know, he wasn't looking for an investor. You know, he was looking for a founder that happened to be an engineer, that happened to may have been in healthcare or in government. And so in this weird little way, I was like, oh my gosh, that's me, you know? Like, I'm an engineer, I started a company, I did these things, and you quickly learn that there was no way that I could have planned for that moment to enter into this little world. And once you're in it, you actually start to realize there's a lot of things that you see that are worth sharing, right? There's a lot of patterns that I think Nicole has seen, that I've seen, that, you know, we have a lot of time today. And so when we get to the Q&A portion of things, like ask us everything and anything about starting companies, how to get them funded, what is it like to do it as a nonprofit, for-profit, like, you know, pick our brains, because, you know, behind the curtain, I think everyone in this room are very like logical thinkers. When you start to see these patterns, they're actually quite easy to explain. And so you just have to ask.
Yeah, so a lot of people raised their hands just now when you asked how many people wanted to be a founder in the next 10 years. And you guys both, I know anytime you're speaking to somebody, regardless of the situation or the place, you're the same person every time. So that genuine personality trait, regardless of the situation, I feel like in conversations I've had with you has gone a long way in networking and establishing meaningful relationships that later on translate to business-related success. So what advice would you have to the people who are, you know, sitting here today, and to us as to forming these types of relationships on a genuine level that can also then mature into business-level conversations?
Well, I think there's a few things that stick out. I hear them more, maybe I'm just more familiar, and I don't know if this is something that resonates with you guys, but I hear a lot of like trust your gut, and I had a good idea over the years of people I didn't want to work with. You know, there was people, even when we were doing the ticketing, that we'll just chalk them up as grimy. We're just not people that we wanted to be in business with. Like one of our early big clients we signed on with was a guy named Pasquale Rotella, who does the big EDC events. If you've ever been to like any of their super raves now in Vegas, it was crazy to like all meet up in the mid-90s together. And like no one knew who any of us were on either side. And you know, a lot of us just came together when we were really young. Like the reason I know Parker and Ken was because I met Sean Fanning through that early, like late 90s music stuff. He's the guy that created Napster, if you're not familiar. But it was like just, like if something seems off or wrong or you don't want to work with them, like you're probably onto something. And like don't let yourself get bullied. I see it we see it in all different situations, but it's just not worth the time. And like you talk about learning, you know, it's like you want to be around people you learn from, you want to be around people you respect. Like peer mentorship is real. There's like, I learned stuff we have a trade. I was like, I'll help you with stuff, you have to send me music. And I kind of started that with a lot of people now, where I'm like, here's my number, you can text me questions and I'll leave it for you guys if you want it. I'm like, but like send me pictures of like baby animals or cool music, or like make sure I know what's going on. Like I don't want to like turn into a lame person. And you know, you just find that trade to like learn from each other, getting away from like the ageism too. When people get caught in that, I'm just like, it's silly.
Yeah, no, the other advice I'd throw in there as well too is, you know, give more than you take. I think that's how you form strong relationships over time, right? I think when you give, it's less transactional, it's less you expect anything from it. I would also say it's, you know, Megan Smith, who was my old boss at the White House, who is...
Do you guys know, she's like one of the coolest.
Yeah. She's amazing. Yeah, sorry? Megan Smith. If you Google her right now on the computers, open up in every single tab, at least 2 or 3 of her talks on YouTube. She is a rocket ship. She was an incredible force in lifting up she would call the TQ in government, right? There's IQ, EQ, and then there's TQ, the technical quotient of folks around the room. But one of the things that this is a little slight tangent, but one of the things she would always do is she would bring people to the table, right? You know, we fought just to get one seat. And so Megan, for her whole career, has been fighting to get a seat at the table. And when she has her moment as the US Chief Technology Officer, right, an assistant to the president, you know, she wouldn't just go and take her seat at the table. She would fight to find a way to get 2 or 3 more. And it's not just for people on her team. She would go and find the 2 or 3 other people scattered across the White House that needed to be there, that were left out. Because I think she learned very quickly in her career that people do things, you know, meetings don't do things, and so you need to bring people into meetings to make things happen. But to answer your question, Russ, about really, the other thing that she was really, really good at was actually just saying hello to people, right? You know, she was one of the most important figures, at least, you know, in our sphere of the White House, and it doesn't matter how important or, you know, in the shadows you were, she would always say hi to you, right? Whether it would be a large meeting or in a kind of big setting, and I really encourage that in this environment here, right? Both Jeannie Kim and especially Tony Hsu. Tony Hsu was a classmate at Berkeley with me, right? We got to work on projects together. We got to hang out of school together, and then years go by, and you never know how you're going to work together again.
So I think a lot of times we hear, like in these particular instances, a lot of life is about who you know. But rather, one of the things I've really learned recently in my own experiences is it's not necessarily who you know, but who knows you and what do they know you for. So I would really like for you guys to kind of impart some knowledge as to, like, you know, maybe there's been times where you felt like you needed to form a connection with somebody to get from point A to point B. However, I feel like this fixed pie smoke and mirrors perception of there's like a fixed pie where not everybody can eat, but rather people who find the most success bring people to the table, like you just said. So can you guys just talk a little bit about, you know, that contrast of, you know, there is an element of finding a strong network and developing, cultivating those proper relationships, and also understanding that, like, not necessarily do you always need something from somebody, but rather you need to provide value that's just tangible.
Okay, well, that was a mouthful.
A little bit.
Yeah. I think I have this. I think something that resonates is, and like, granted, remember, I was rolling around with like a lot of rappers and definitely had "go fuck yourself" come out my mouth more than once. And it was something that I've had to see and really think and look back, like, who did I like say this to? And do I need do I owe them an apology? And then there was moments where there's been people who I forgot I had even like interacted with or talked to, and I'll see them years later and they were like, "You were so nice to me, you were so inviting." And I'm always like just thankful that I had like touched them or was, you know, warm and welcoming. But it goes a long way, like, between the internet and like everyone's ability to kind of keep a little more tabs on everyone, like being nice and being helpful. And I just want to reiterate what you said, like just giving and realizing like your connections and your introductions, like you don't own people. Like, this isn't my friend Russ, like this is our friend Russ. And even like how you word it, like I see big leaders make a post on social media and they'll be like, "My friend put this book out." And it was like, whoa, hold your horses. Like, that person's friends with a lot of people. Like, you don't own them. And I think just being generous, and then also being generous in your introductions. Like, I've known Betsy a long time. She introduced me to Min and Valerie, and like, these are badass bitches. To be able to like have them come to this talk and like hang out and learn from them. And Betsy could have been like, "These are my people." And I think it's like, you're all classmates. You have kids you went to high school with. You have people you'll continue to meet at each job or startup or adventure you do. And like, be generous with putting them together.
There was a big question you asked, Russ. I think another part of it was, how do you get known for something or things, right? I think you shouldn't be afraid to put yourself out there. You actually should, because I think it's hard for people to discover what you're good at if you don't write, publish, create, build. Like, you have to put those things out there, but don't be afraid that it's going to define who you are. Like, if you looked back, like, you know, when you look at a bio of someone, it's usually it's really easy to look back at the past and kind of tell a nice little story. But my Cal experience was pretty crazy, like varied, right? It was everything from doing a bunch of engineering things to doing the Cal TV station. I managed a band, and it's like you get known for video editing, but then also for being really good at logarithms. Like it's like a weird kind of world, and it's okay, but put it out there what you're good at, because you never know if someone's going to need that help or that assistance. You know, when things ended up, you know, you fast forward the 12 years later to the point when, you know, someone was looking for a partner for John, you know, I put out there that I was an engineer, that I had built a company. It was very discoverable, right? You know, make it easy for people to find you, because they will.
No, it's interesting on that. Like, I've also partnered up and created a lot of small things. Like, it doesn't have to be huge. I've started a secret pizza society with a friend like 5 years ago, and you know, it's still going. It's mostly filled with pizza memes on Facebook, but we'll like surprise you. Actually, someone sent me a pizza yesterday who was a Cal grad. He was like so excited about this talk, he surprised me with a pizza. And but like just little, like, even they could be like one-off shows. I know you did like a music show, and like I think too you start to hone your skills and kind of cut your teeth and get an idea of what you want to do. Like, don't just get caught in like, I'm an engineer and I'm just going to do this engineering track. Like, you can go and like, you know, play around with little areas that maybe aren't going to be what you make money off of or your name.
I think we're living in a pretty lucky time where at least every discipline that we care about, at least I care about, like whether it be computing to healthcare and whatnot, in politics, it's like, it's changing in front of us, right? Affordable Care Act comes out, you have to throw every healthcare book away because guess what? We're starting over again. Like, if anybody here is in computer science, it's like that field is reinventing itself every single day. And so politics, same. The whole world changed 2 years ago, right? There's so many things that are changing that I think you have to know that your opinion and your viewpoint of the world is really important. And so, you know, don't take it for granted if it's in just here and keeping it to yourself. Like, share it, because you may find that it's pretty unique and people want to hear it.
So I was recently at a talk with Michael Siebel at Cal Hacks. Mm-hmm. And Michael Siebel, one of the things he was saying with regards to entrepreneurship and being a founder more specifically, is that it sounds really sexy to say that you're a founder, but really it's filled with a lot of late nights, a lot of on the verge of crisis, scrambling to meet payroll. Can you guys talk a little bit about the ups and downs of being a founder and what it takes to be a good founder?
Oh, well, everyone I know that has done it and stayed in it and like pushed through, especially once they're on like a second or third company. Like, I'm very lucky. I've had all but like 4 companies sell of 5. And one of them is just kind of in the internet, just hanging out. And it's something that, like, you know, we busted our butt, and yeah, I mean, it's just crazy shit after crazy stuff, like things you can never plan for. I think the biggest thing is that I always push for, and what, on my investing side, I believe this to be true, is like, find a really good co-founder. Find that partner. Like, going it alone, and I see people, and I love when they're all smug. They're like, I'm going to do this alone. I'm like, ooh, talk to me in a year and a half when you're having a nervous breakdown. I'm like, that'll be great. But like, just having that pillar, have great investors, have great advisors, like just having a good like station around you of people goes a long way. And then how you hire. Like, if you can't be paranoid or having bullying going on or parenting your team, like, you definitely need your early team to be like, you're going in, you're like in your own little war zone, and I put blinders on. Like, even these like powerhouse of women I was introduced like a month ago, and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm in the thick of Q4, like I can't make any plans, and they respected that. I've had a lot of people along the way either kind of like peel off or they adapt, but there's definitely moments where people are like, you're not coming to this thing, and it's like, no, I'm tearing my hair out right now at the office. Like, why would I be in public? And like, you just have to make those choices.
And you're tearing your hair out, but you're loving it. Like, that's the reality. You are loving it because it's something that, like, you see the world in a pretty darn unique way, and you want to make it come to life. I think the best thing about being a founder is that feeling, but it is a roller coaster. It gets really hard, right? When it's you alone and you're thinking about payroll, you're thinking about, does this product work or does it not? What am I doing wrong? Who can I reach out to advice? That's why the team piece is really, really important. Like, find that other co-founder, find two co-founders, because you never know how things are going to end up playing out over the course of the multi-year journey or multi-week journey that you go down. I would say the other thing I would love to throw in add there is like when you start on this entrepreneurial journey, set some goals for yourself, right? Like what are you trying to achieve or what are you trying to measure? You know, just so you know, it's like a little bit of like your own objective and key result, right? Like I want to build the next X. And it's successful if we do these three things and say, well, let's check in a couple of weeks. And in a couple of weeks, you come in there and you realize you haven't achieved it. It doesn't mean stop. It means, well, do you want to continue this or not? Let's keep at it, right? You can keep at it over and over and over again. I think the hardest part is when you meet an entrepreneur or a founder that's been at this slog for multi-years, and then they realize that, shoot, they should have been measuring certain things earlier so they could have known to change or pivot or just change course. And so that's a kind of a really important self-awareness.
So I find that a lot of founders and really just people who have a lot of like entrepreneurial leanings tend to have either this element of serendipity that they like to enjoy in their life and just kind of taking opportunities as they come. But then some have a very concrete vision of something that they're trying to create. It's a concrete vision of what they want to change in the world. I feel like both of you have elements of both. Can you speak a little bit about how you cope with setting visions, setting goals and objectives, but also dealing with the ebbs and flows of life as it comes?
I mean, you just don't have a choice. Like, you just don't know when Wall Street's going to throttle a company and take out like $150 billion like stock drop, and you just don't know when there's going to be a hurricane coming through, and you have like people on your team get sick, and stuff just happens. Like you get ready for that, or you get a call. Like Ryan actually knows, he's been really helpful. Like a pretty big, cool dude in tech reached out to me a couple weeks ago who I wasn't familiar with, and I was able to, through Googling, see that I thought they knew each other, and he's like, yeah, I worked with this guy for years, he's amazing, and immediately got to find a lot of connection of that, and it was something that it wasn't in our plan or roadmap, but when you get a call from someone at that level, you take it, and you explore it, and I think, I don't know, I think if anyone thinks they're gonna just stick to it, I mean, even someone like, I think a good example is the late Steve Jobs. We see at times of he's like, you're gonna use this phone and you're gonna like it, and obviously a lot of us do, but there was stuff that happened. Like at one point in time, they weren't using an Intel processor chip, and this dude was back off in his office just kind of tinkering around, and one day at the end of the year, they were like, what have you done this year? And he was like, and he went and dug around, and he's like, well, this Intel chip can work in our computer. And they were like, are you serious? And they went and they're like, do it again. And he went to Fry's and he rebuilt it. And the next day, it's like December, Jobs went to Japan and met with them. And like, I guarantee you, Steve Jobs didn't plan on doing that, but he was like, oh, we'll take that processor. So I think even the most stringent, like, no.
I mean, timing is so important, right? You have your team, you have this incredible idea, it hopefully addresses a really big market or a market you care about, right? Scale, I think on the venture side, we really want companies to go really big, but you can also start an organization that does really good in a particular area as well too, but timing is a very big function of that, right? It doesn't help to start Instagram today. It helped to start Instagram a while ago, right? It doesn't help to start 23andMe today. It was better to start it, right when these inflection points happen, right? We've gone through a set of pretty amazing tsunamis, right? There was I
want to add to this. People at Flickr and some of these other photo things are bummed. Like they wanted to be Instagram.
Of course. It's like there have been these waves at Kleiner. It's like we've kind of mapped them out. It's like you have in the 70s, the microprocessor did this magical thing of putting computing in everyone's desktops, not their hands yet, right? From there, you switched to connectivity, right? This is the first wave of the internet. Then you jumped and switched into the next tsunami of mobile and cloud happening at the same time, right? All of our mobile phones couldn't be as powerful as they are without the cloud. And we're kind of at this next maybe tsunami of, what does artificial intelligence do to all these ideas and things that we've kind of attacked before? And so if you can take advantage of these waves, you really can create something pretty disruptive. we also live kind of in a pretty neat time where distribution is just so different and so accessible. Like I think the scales of success of companies now are very different than they were 10 years ago because of the App Store, because of how accessible the internet is, what it's like to have thousands and hundreds of thousands of followers. You can, make them do work.
So before we get into questions, I would like for everybody here to kind of just get to know you guys a little bit more on a personal level. Mm-hmm. So when you strip away the work and all the many obligations you have on a day-to-day basis, what are the things outside of that help to keep you sane? I know, Ryan, you just had a child, which is an amazing experience. Congrats. Nicole, you're a music audiophile just like myself. So what are the things that you guys enjoy that keep you grounded, keep you sane?
So I've had, I've been always in the mountains since about the age of 4. And I did a trip actually with Google a couple years ago. We went to Everest and dropped off a team at base camp, but they were filming. It had never been on Google Earth before, a lot of the Himalayas. And so we trekked up with a crew of us, and then we did a huge pitch to the president of the World Bank on sanitation. And the sanitation through the Himalayas is pretty much nothing. Like it's a very poor system and it's very dangerous. But through that, like I've gotten known for hikes and climbing, and so a lot of people will meet up with me. I've been working on the 14ers in Colorado, which is like a little aggressive, but 2 of my big mentors, Nancy Conrad and Charlie Irgan, have done all of the 14ers and have done them with me, and it's just like a nice kind of cadence, and it's like you can kind of push yourself for a day or two, get good thinking time, but a lot of nature time. I'm like a really subpar surfer, but working my way into it. And I host a lot of dinners, feed a lot of people. It's fun to get together and kind of see different fields and minds interact.
Nothing is more grounding than a 8-week-old baby crying. My wife and I welcomed a baby boy into the world on October 3rd, and it's been the coolest thing ever. I think we always were dog people. We have a dog. His name is Ashby, named after the street, and because my wife and I met at Berkeley, and so we of course had to name our dog Ashby. But having a kid has been quite amazing. It puts a lot of things in perspective. I think the first one, it kind of just slaps you in the face with, it asks you, the baby, clearly, are you working on the most important things for my future, right? And I think if you can answer that question, yes, you wake up every day even more invigorated, right? Whether that's changing someone's life on a local level, like on a one-to-one or something at scale. To escape from work, I'm a very curious person. I like fixing things, and I get really curious about like problems. And for me, it's a lot of whether it be Googling or talking to people. Like right now, I'm kind of obsessed with bus bunching, right? Like Muni lines and things like that. Why are they always so either late or behind? And so I kind of go down these rat holes, but these rat holes I hopefully think are ways to improve things for most folks. But outside of that, I think the one thing that Nicole said that you have to absolutely do is build community, right? Hosting dinners is such an easy thing to do, and most people don't think of doing it, right? You just can order pizza, or if you're a good cook, cook something and invite 6 other people, and it's quite incredible, right? You get to actually create space for folks. I think we're kind of at this moment where, that third space outside of the home and work, it's like, where is that, right? And so if you can create that for your community, it becomes really important.
And do you guys get together outside? I'm sure school is hard. I know this is like one of the more impressive schools here, but like, do you get together and do things outside? Like raise your hand if you're gathering for salons or dinners. I mean, you eat, so like always remember that. Like you have to eat. Like Soylent is not a real meal. Maybe once a day, but get, have breakfast with other folks and like have dinner and like making, I think more than Betsy's like hosted one of the most famous salons in the Bay for 12 years straight, every month. And it gave all these people a chance to like meet each other and, it's like just have a meal. It's why I think a lot of the companies have the food programs there. Like I'll go to Facebook and eat their lunch every day. Like, it's great.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So we'd like to open it up now for questions. If anybody would like to raise your hands, I guess I'll call out on people. If anybody's got questions. Oh, well, that works too.
Hi. Thank you, Nicole and Ryan, for coming and speaking with us, and Russ for moderating. My question is, do you think in Silicon Valley a project needs to have VC funding in order to become a successful startup, and why?
No. I think there's different funding for different reasons. It depends. What do you actually need money? There's some stuff. I've watched people build huge businesses with two of them that were both coders, were able to put a huge amount of work together. They had to teach themselves some forward business, kind of force themselves in it. But and venture won't invest in a lot of things unless they think it's a large-scale growth process. I don't know if that's like something that's realized to you all, but I think the angel network's pretty big, and that can be really helpful. And there's a lot of like really unique kind of prize money and grants that keep coming up too.
You don't need money to start a venture. I think that's like kind of the magical thing, right? It's like with the computer that you have, with the little few, everyone gets free AWS credits, right? I think we do, right? Yeah, and so with like just that, you can get started on something, or if you make something, you can sell it online. Like there's ways to get started, but venture capital is a very powerful thing, right? Because if you can raise money, you can build a team, hire more folks. You can sometimes go after bigger problems that just yourself you wouldn't be able to do alone. And so just like think about what you're going after, but don't make it the kind of gating piece of whether you should start or not start. There are seed and angel networks that really invest in ideas. And at that stage, it really is the people, right? At that moment, investors are looking at a group of people and saying, do I believe they can build the product that they say they are? And that's a lot of times why a lot of seed and angel dollars go to, founders or entrepreneurs that have done things before. If you've written papers, like there's proof that this crazy idea that you have could possibly be possible. And so, that's that kind of little risk de-risking moment, and that's why seed and angel checks are written. But as soon as you start building something, there's like proof points that are there, and that's when you start to see more, early stage venture, right? Like a Series A or B come to life because you built something, you can see proof points of it working, you can see it scaling. The investor can see how that money going in can turn into something that's growing inside.
I would also caution, like if you have an idea and you're working on it, like don't try to build the idea to go with venture. Like I don't have a list, but there's been a lot of things that didn't have venture backing that did quite well. And doing a supersized company isn't always the thing either. So like I would just, like don't base your life around the venture. I've seen people do this where they're like trying to hit every box to get seen by venture, and they don't work on their idea.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for coming. I had a question mostly for Ryan, but for you guys as well. So I've been working on this project for a little while. It's like a ride-sharing recruitment company where I just recruit ride-share drivers, mostly through like social media, making videos. And that's why I started it, just to get like the referral fees or the referral bonuses. But I've also found through growing this community, that there's a lot of tension between rideshare drivers and rideshare companies. And there's a lot of people who do rideshare who like kind of despise these companies. And I've been trying to grow this community. I know you're talking about community through this digital platform. And I don't know, do you have any advice for like growing the community of people? Because it's a very specific kind of niche that I found, that there's not a lot of community there, but there's a lot of community that I see for potential.
That's an interesting question. I think both Nicole and I feel like you know this community better than anyone, right? I feel like you've found this group, you've given them something, i.e. access to these opportunities, i.e. ride-sharing jobs, but you also probably are hearing about their grievances. You're probably hearing about, you can serve their needs. Like, you served need number one, which is helping them find the job, but what are those second, third, fourth order needs that are there? Is it, better pay? Is it getting health care? Is it, this group better than all of us in this room.
How large is the group?
Are
we talking 100, 1,000?
Yeah, I've
50?
probably recruited a couple hundred, and then I just have a bunch of people who are already drivers who yeah.
Is this almost set up like a union, or like what's?
No,
kind of
it's not a union.
Okay, just curious. Just curious. I'm from Detroit, so
Yeah.
always curious on
There's
this.
not any rideshare unions out there.
Oh, I'm aware. Have you made any partnership with any of the ride-sharing companies at all, or talked with them about that?
I've been talking with Uber about just kind of what's going on with drivers and some of their concerns, but since they're independent contractors, it's kind of hard to form like unions and give them access to healthcare and stuff like that.
There's a few things that I would strongly recommend to avoid, and it's seen a lot as like the parent-child relationship, and you want to speak to them as adults. And a lot of times people can come in and they'll like complain like a child. And if you pander to that, then all of a sudden you become their parent. And it's not a healthy business relationship. No job is easy or great. There's always going to be an up and down here and there. This is something that 5 and 10 years ago, this job was seen as awesome. Now that everyone's kind of comfortable and everyone's trying, not leave money on the table, and there's a lot of politics involved, literally. There's a lot more that comes with it now. But before getting caught up in who's upset, like I would focus on the people who like the job, who are doing it well. And then I would look at either partnering with other groups or building a relationship. I would build it with Lyft and Uber, and I've heard a few other smaller ones here and there, and just have a nice rapport with them. But it's something that when you talk about like the community of it, like you get people that get toxic, and for whatever reason they're having a bad life or a bad year, like you don't want that bleeding into the community.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not necessarily like as qualified as these two, but
Sure.
just based off of your idea, I find it interesting. And I think that maybe if you look internationally as well, because there's opportunities for rideshare, not just with Uber and like domestically, but actually China's rideshare business is larger than Uber's. So if you look internationally, there's like different cultures of like working, and like you could even hire people to work under you and recruit in various areas and start an LLC, and then you would just be recruiting more people and making more money. But that's just my take on
definitely.
things.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Hi, thank you for coming right here. So we're in an entrepreneurship class, and a lot of us here are budding entrepreneurs. We're in communities that encourage that sort of thing. And I wanted to sort of comment on and ask you about this bifurcation in entrepreneurship at Cal and in larger Silicon Valley. There seem to be two types of entrepreneurs, ones that are interested in building products and solving problems and the grand theory of Silicon Valley, and those that are very well versed with the apparatus of Silicon Valley and raising money and how to like get the best sort of funding and make their way to Series B. And it seems like the field is being crowded out by the second category. It seems that a lot of entrepreneurs these days are self-serving, not necessarily interested in solving problems, but sort of getting ahead in this capitalist race. I wanted to hear how the litmus test at your venture firms sort of distinguishes these two, and whether it's something that you think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the rat race of entrepreneurship that's usually played out on, whether it be Twitter or the like TechCrunch and things like that, it only captures kind of a slice of what's really happening. When we look at least the past like 3 investments that we've done, one of them is a women's health clinic based in New York called Thiel. The other one is a company called Moss that helps you fill out your FAFSA in one little step and helps you apply for all of state aid. I think, our set of partners and like our viewpoint of the world kind of makes us run away from the same kind of companies and kind of like toxicity that you're describing. But that's us as a firm, and that's us as a partnership. But I would say that for all of that stuff that's happening that gives you that kind of feeling, there's a lot of good happening on the other side. I think usually when you run toward industries of purpose, healthcare, education, like you'll find more mission-driven entrepreneurs that are doing things. And it's not to say that those folks in those other worlds are doing things bad or wrong, but I think some of the negative elements just get played up a lot.
Yeah. No, I think there's a phrase I really like, and I recommend you consider holding on to this too is people show and tell you who they really are. You just have to like watch and listen. Like they're constantly telling you if they're a jerk. But you know, you get caught in their like whole thing and it's like, don't get caught in the show. And like there's always a handful of loudmouths, there always has been. I'm sure if we were here in the gold rush, you know, there'd be someone that we're like, oh, that bro, like he's terrible. And like it's like you want to focus and find who you connect with and like don't read TechCrunch, first of all. And like, don't go get caught up in this, like, there's a bunch of people I don't follow on Twitter because they're just yapping away. And then there's people that are like really interesting and genuine and nice and like honest. And like, I think it's like, it's always happened. I don't think there's ever been a time there hasn't been kind of that loudmouth know-it-all.
It happens in every cycle, and at least what I've noticed in just only a few cycles is that usually those loudmouths, they end up disappearing. Right? It's like the ones that people that are creating very durable companies are the ones that last. And so, more questions?
Yeah. Hello? Yeah. Sorry, yeah. A while back ago, I read a book called The Dictator's Handbook, and it was talking about like the Machiavellian model for leadership. And I had this question since then, and pardon my French, but do you have to be a dick to be a good leader?
I think it is definitely a popular model that people pick. I think it's really unfortunate. I think the more, I always tell friends, it's like, don't fund things like that. Don't be friends with people like don't encourage that. I'm not a fan. I think it's like really trying on the system, like the nervous system. But I think you can be thoughtful and you can be nice. It's gone a long way for me to admit when I've messed up, you know, and own it. It's also gone a long way for me. Like I've said, like, you know, I've had to call a few people and apologize and be like, I was a total jerk. I'm really sorry. And that's thankfully always gone over well. But I look at people sometimes that are just so mean and I'm like, what happened to them? Like, I don't know how they got there. I'm not a psychologist. It's not my problem. But I like try to stay away from them.
John Doerr talks about missionary versus mercenary cultures, right? I think we give a lot of credit to mercenary cultures. Like it's really easy to write about mercenary cultures, but it's truly the missionary ones that are the ones worth following, the ones that we want to work for. And so, you know, Machiavelli, you know, good author, wrote his thing, did his jam, but it's like I think in order to actually have a really good, thriving company today that has a diverse workforce that wants to work on hard problems, you can't be a dick. And I think you know that, especially. Like, it's like you just can't be, because, you know, I think if you're like an a-hole here at school, you know, you lose your friends, you know, in the real world out there with like companies, you lose your employees, and your employees are everything. If you lose your best employee, you saw what happened at Uber, right? That huge just evacuation of people, their best talent left without any question when things started to really show its true colors.
So again, I'm not as qualified as these guys, but I definitely have had some good experience in leadership. One from UGBA 105, if any of you guys have that, or 150 from Professor Mulhern, great class, learned a lot about leadership. But I've been an athlete my entire life, and you got a lot of people, especially on football teams and competitive athletics, try to be leaders by being dicks, and that doesn't work. I think that the best element to building strong teams is synergy within the team, and the best leaders in that the mercenary versus missionary type of idiom are the people who you can look to when things aren't going well and are going to spur growth. So yeah, don't get that mixed up at all. Authority and leadership are two completely different things.
Hi. Hello. I was just wondering, as founders and investors, how the various investor and founder strategies differ in different economic conditions. Like, we're obviously in a pretty big bubble right now, or at least it seems like it. So how does strategy differ in this case versus when there might have been a recent crash, like in 2008 or 2009?
So I'm like a hobby economist, so I don't want to get too deep down this rabbit hole. I hope to never see anything like 2008 again. I definitely took a hit on that. It was my first big loss, and still sad about it 10 years later. But I think that I don't know, I get really 50-50 in the hype, like this whole like fake news hype type of thing where I think there's so many great companies that are being built, there's companies going, there's people employed with a lot of jobs, there's some companies that haven't been able to make it for some reason, they break apart, people get hires, people get fire sales, it's great. But like, it just ebbs and flows. It's like the coming and going of it. I don't know. I may be wrong once again. Like, I am not, Alan Greenspan up here and want to start making any sort of like provisions of where we're going on a bubble. But I get a little hesitant when people start talking bubble, that it's just kind of like hype words.
I think, if you're a founder of a company, fundraising is, one of your main priorities, right? Like, it's like you go down the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Like, I actually kind of joke my career is like the Maslow hierarchy of needs. I started out as a designer and kind of engineer, then moved to more organizational building. And at the end of the day, the funding, whether you're a for-profit, nonprofit, or in government, like without that money, your organization doesn't survive. And so you have to be really thoughtful that these cycles may, this upward cycle may not last. And so, being really thoughtful about how you spend your cash flow, how you fundraise, should you raise more now just in case something happens? These are all things that you should be really thoughtful about. But when you look at that 07, 08 period of time, there were kind of incredible companies started in that window, right? Like Airbnb is one of those great examples that was started then and really lasted because they got really scrappy. They took their funding and made it last as long as it could. And so you have to know that these things will look like this, and you have to just be ready for them.
Well, it kind of interesting you brought up Airbnb. It hit a market time where when a lot of people needed extra cash, Airbnb, I remember friends being like staying at their boyfriend's place and back at their parents to rent their place to make money so they could make their rent. And like, so it kind of also hit just the right market cap. Timing is crazy. Like my first companies, I was early every time, way early, years early. And the company I'm doing now, which is in data, and we get to work on a lot of regulation. Like this spring I was in heaven as all these news headlines were coming out and people were kind of panicking, and I was like, oh, we're right on time. And it was my experience from the past and realizing I didn't have to rush, where I watched a lot of my peers working on similar things, either like exit or sell by now. And it's been interesting to kind of keep a pace and cadence, and just you never know what the market's gonna look like, the highs and lows of the stock market. Like chasing that, I think, is, unless we have a huge crash again, like I just don't even look.
I actually wanted to give you all an opportunity to approach Ryan and Nicole and also Russ afterwards, so I thought we'd give you a little extra time. But I wanted to especially thank Russ for taking a chance, really, and sharing your relationship with Nicole and Ryan with all of us and from your perspective. So thank you for doing that. I encourage all of you all not just to follow up, but also to take risks. And Ryan has a closing thought. I have a few questions, actually. I always feel like getting really selfish with an audience like this. Before the closing, I don't have a closing thought. I have more questions for you guys. How many? It's a rapid fire set of questions that raise your hand, and which applies. How many of you actually have had Soylent? Oh, okay. iPhone? Android? Okay. Purchased Bitcoin? Interesting. Do you have any questions, Nicole? I feel like this is like I
this
just
is
want
like.
you to know.
Have you?
Ryan,
Who's opened up Facebook this past week? Oh, okay.
Has anyone stopped using Facebook? Okay. Has anyone raised money? All right. Well, let's come up with a few more. This is
I know
fun.
this is like golden.
Mini surveys. How many of you can code in here? I mean, maybe not basic. I think we've left with that. But what are you guys coding in? Like something complex, like a C++ or like a JSON, or are we talking like Java?
How many have you deployed to AWS?
Oh,
nice. This is really awesome. Signal? No, nobody. WhatsApp? A few. Okay, this is cool.
Telegram? Or is it Telegram? Telegram is that called?
Purchasing habits. Allbirds? I know you guys heard them speak.
He was just in last week.
Yeah.
Oh, what about are you guys using scooters?
Scooters.
Scooters cool? No, scooters are not cool.
Stitch Fix?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Great.
Wait, what was
Really?
that?
No one else?
Oh.
It's expensive.
Statistics, yeah.
It's expensive.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That was really helpful. But a closing thought.
Oh,
I give Nicole the hard questions.
do you know what? I would try your best to not worry about what other people think. Unless you're being a total jerk, then you might need to like take a look inside. But like, Richard Feynman, a physicist some of you guys might be familiar with, great one, wrote a book and he titled it Don't Care What Other People Think About You or something like that. Some like awkward title. And I think it's really true. Like, it's so easy to get caught up in like keeping up with the Joneses and like the Joneses of Silicon Valley. But yeah, I mean, you made it this far. You got to Berkeley. You're doing all right.
Have fun. Keep learning new things. Open up new doors. Help your fellow colleagues. Build community. You know, it's like we only get a few chances at bat, and so just make sure you're having fun when you're doing it.
Heck yeah.
So I just want to thank you all. It's been fantastic. I know students will come up. I'll go ahead and post the link for you all, but if you want to go up before you finish the feedback, we have about 5 minutes for you all to talk to the speakers, and you can post your feedback on the link up until 9 o'clock tonight. Thank you for tonight. I'll see you all next week.